Welcome to Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul Delegro, your host, and my guest today is Paul Ross. He's an author and of a best-selling book, Subtle Words That Sell. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you. Plug, plug, plug. Here it
There you
is.
go. And we'll put that in. We'll tag that in the
Sure.
when we publish it. So glad to have you, by the way. So
Thank
you're
you.
also a podcaster too. Before we start getting into the guts of what you do, you're kind of a sales trainer, all that good stuff. You're a podcaster as well.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that before we get going.
So my podcast is called The Influencer's Edge, and we talk to people who are on the cutting edge of sales, influence, persuasion. We like to talk to people who are contrarian, who don't teach conventional stuff, who are way outside of the norm, who color outside the lines, disconnect the dots, and are very outrageous, bat bleep, crazy folks who have some technology that really, really works. We've interviewed Richard Bandler, the co-founder of NLP, Chase Hughes, who's one of my mentors. I don't know if you've ever heard of Chase. Chase is a former interrogator for U.S. intelligence services, the Army, law enforcement, and he teaches how to apply these skills for sales, persuasion, and everyday life. We've had some amazing guests.
Well, great. Well, hopefully you get some people to listen in. I may steal some of your guests, by the way. They sound great.
I have no problem. Go for it.
All right, cool. Well, hey, so you're an author. The reason why I want to have you on is I've been in sales for 35 years, and I've taken every sales training class I think known to mankind, and I've always felt like there's always a little pearl in each one of them. Right. There's always something you can take out of that, and everyone has different strategies and philosophies on how to sell. But you take a little bit of a different twist on this, but you've never really been a salesman, although we're selling every day. We both know that.
That's not true. If I may,
Okay.
I've been doing online sales for 30 years. Actually, I only got online. Well, the internet didn't really come into play. The web got on in 1994. I've been selling courses and training to men who have no clue about dating and mating with women.
Okay. So I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to get into that's how did you get into what you're doing? Because you started getting into this dating thing.
So I was a 25, 26-year-old virgin who'd never even kissed a girl. And I tried psychology. I tried therapy. I tried praying, chanting. Nothing worked for me until I stumbled onto NLP.
Did you try alcohol? That's what I want to know.
No, I don't drink.
There's your mistake right there. I mean,
no. I want consent, and I want my brain to be clear. I always think the only advantage I have with people is my mind, and why would I want to pour salt in the engine? So in any event, I stumbled onto neurolinguistic programming. Actually, ironically, took some classes and training from the guy who co-created it, Richard Bandler, who later, well, I never thought 30 years ago that he'd become a guest on a show I was doing. That's a mind blow.
Pretty
right
cool.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So through NLP, I discovered how to use their tools of influence and persuasion and self-change, healing my mindset to start being successful with the ladies. And then about 15 years ago, I started getting emails from guys who said, hey, here's pictures of my wife, my kids. Thank you for my family. Oh, by the way, I've been using your stuff for sales. My sales have gone up 30, 40, 50. One guy told me 300%. I thought, damn, there's more money in teaching sales, and let's map this over. So really, if you think about it, Paul, a sale and a date are very similar. You've got to do your prospect outreach. You've got to establish rapport, ask the right questions, do your qualifying closes, handle objections, go for the close again. And if you're into it and are good at it, you can get referrals. So
no, all good points. And so you transition, but the same skill set, right? So you really just took those skills, kind of tailored them towards sales, right?
Actually, sales is easier. It's much more difficult to teach guys who have all this trauma and all these issues than it is. If I can take guys who are 40 years old and never had a date, show them how to build confidence, handle hearing no, be effective communicators and powerful communicators, then I can take an already successful salesperson and skyrocket what they do. And I only work with people who are already highly successful because I'm the most expensive coach and trainer you'll ever be glad you hired. I don't come cheap. So I like to work with people who are already successful and who can afford my outrageous, egregious fees.
Well, at least you're on. I like that, Paul. You're honest anyway. So what possess? I always that's whenever I have an author on, I always say, what possessed you to write a book? Because it's one thing to have all these tactics and techniques. It's another thing to say, hey, I'm going to put it in writing. So what possessed you?
Well, there are a couple of things. I've always wanted to make an impact with my ideas. When I was a little kid, my mom said, you're going to be the John. Well, she said two things. She said, you're going to be the Johnny Appleseed of ideas. I said, who's Johnny Appleseed? She said, well, he went around from town to town planting little apple seeds, and then he would come back every year and see how the trees had sprouted. I thought, okay. And then she also, one day I was sassing her. She pointed her finger at me and said, if you don't knock it off, you'll grow up to be an iconoclast. I said, what's that? She said, someone who goes around kicking over other people's sacred ideas and really making them angry and upset. I thought, yes, mommy, I want to be that. So what I like to do is put my ideas into any format, any channel that people can consume them. So I thought, let's express myself in a book. And the book took me like 4 months to write, but I've been thinking about the ideas for decades. And also, to be quite frank, having a book and saying you're an author is a good way to make an impression. If you're a speaker or a trainer and you have a book, and you say, I'm an author, that immediately increases your perceived value right away.
No doubt. Even for us that have podcasts, when people find out I have a podcast, it's like instant credibility.
And having a book impresses the chicks.
Yeah. Well, I'm a married man, so I'm past that stage,
Okay.
So cool. Well, tell me a little bit. You've touched on a few things, but what was the genesis of your techniques? Like what started your techniques? What techniques do you use? I know you talk about a lot about words in your book. I did read your book.
You did or did not?
I did.
Okay. So for me, the first thing is to have deep insights into the basic rules of influencing people on the subconscious mind and the subconscious level. That's really what it's about. And the first insight I got is you're never selling your products or your services. You're always selling decisions and good feelings about decisions. So that really changed my entire insight of how the sales process really works effectively. Because one of the other things I know from my NLP training is people's decisions are dependent on what frame of mind they're in. Let me give you an example, okay? So there is a couple of studies done, the same study done on different universities. And what they did is they showed male college students arousing images. And then they gave them a survey which said, how likely are you to have unprotected sex? And those numbers are pretty high. The control group was they gave guys just neutral images, and they answered they're very unlikely to have unprotected sex. So they were primed. They were in a state of mind, and that state of mind determined the decisions and the way they were thinking. So it occurred to me, all right, if I'm selling decisions, then what states of mind do I want my prospects to be in? To give you a metaphor, Paul, and this is not a trick question. I want to conduct a current of electricity. I have a sheet of gold foil and a sheet of cardboard. Which one of those will conduct the electricity? And it's not a trick question.
Of course, the gold.
The gold. So think of your prospect's state of mind as being the conductive medium, and your sales information, your data, your numbers as being the electricity. How can we get them in the gold foil states of being focused, of trusting you, of wanting to believe you, and most importantly, trusting their own ability to make a good decision? You see, everyone talks about know, like, and trust, but my teaching, my insight is know, like, and trust is no longer enough. Now you've got to get the prospect to believe that they can trust their own ability to make a good decision, unless they're extremely sophisticated investors.
Yeah.
People don't trust that ability. And even if they did, they don't trust that they deserve to get what it is you're offering. If you're offering a high ticket item, they don't trust that they can make it work for them. So they don't trust their capability. They don't trust that it would work for anyone. That's their sense of possibility. And they don't believe they deserve it. And that just kills everything. But they can't quite articulate that. They may not be in touch with that consciously. So you need to create those gold foil states before you do anything else.
So I know I think I heard you you wrote it in the book, something about trying to make someone feel proud of their decision and feel good about their decision, right? And that's kind of what you try to, that's the end state you try to get to, correct?
From the very beginning, I want to sow the seeds that they're going to
Yeah.
make a good decision. So I would never say to a client, before you decide to buy with me today, I just want you to understand you're going to make a great decision. They would go, yeah, get out of here. They'd hang up the phone.
Yeah, a little hokey, right? You know.
Well, it's not that it's hokey, it's just that it's too direct. I would be much more vague. See, in NLP, we teach people how to speak vaguely and hypnotically, and then we teach people how to get specific. I would say something like, before we explore this opportunity together today, I just wanted to invite you to please share the questions that naturally arise when a great decision is being made. Now, there's a lot loaded into that sentence
Right.
that take apart. But notice I left that last piece vague. A great decision is being made. Well, made by whom? When? According to what criteria? To do what? It's deliberately vague. And when you're vague like that, the prospect's unconscious mind has to do a deep dive down and come up with a meaning that makes sense. So very early on, I want to prime that subject, that prospect, to believe in themselves and to trust not just me, but trust themselves. And
Right.
that can be established very quickly.
Yeah, a lot of people are risk averse, right? So they're some people are afraid to make decisions.
And some people just, that's true, fear, but more importantly, confusion. I think fear is overrated as the block. Often it's confusion and the inability to focus. Look, I don't have my phone with me. I turned it off and put it in the other room, which is what I do when I conduct a podcast and when I'm a guest. It just shows respect for the audience. But if I had my phone with me, I would hold it up and say, this is one of the number one problems with making a sale, that people cannot focus. How many times a day do you check your messages on your phone? And we have text messaging, Facebook Instant Messenger, TikTok, YouTube. I remember when YouTube ads were 1 minute and 30 seconds long. Now you can click off after 5 seconds. People just cannot focus. So this is one of the reasons why they can't make good decisions. The second thing, and it's related to that, is your competition is using the same techniques, the same standard commonly taught techniques. So it becomes a foot race to see who can get to them first, because a tactic identified as a tactic disarmed. So if you're doing what your competition is doing and they've already done it, then you're in a bad position because your prospect will see it coming. That's why I say, no, do something radically different. Follow something that someone who's a little bit nutty, who comes from outside the field, who has a different set of insights, and you'll see some remarkable increases in your results. You have to be able to handle thinking outside the box. If you can't think outside the box, then you're not the kind of person who can find yourself wanting to hire me. You're someone who just doesn't make a good match.
Right. And that happens, right? I mean, not everyone is a good match.
No.
Yeah. So talk about, you talked a lot about different words you use and different phrases you use to kind of lead the conversation. Talk a little bit about obviously we can't talk about every one. We don't have enough time, but give some good examples of what something salesmen can do and use, some techniques that they can use.
So let's talk about objections. There's a principle in human behavior that's really powerful. And the principle is that people think, respond, act in predictable patterns. People are pretty much pattern machines. They don't have a lot of flexibility in their thinking. And so there's a technique that I borrowed from clinical hypnosis and NLP called the pattern interrupt. When you interrupt people's patterns, they have a temporary window of suggestibility through which you can move them.
Okay.
So for example, if someone says, I need more time to think it over, some of the responses they're expecting to hear are, okay, here's my card. Or, well, What is it you need to think over? Or high pressure, come on, let's make this deal today. I want to do something unexpected. So when someone says to me, I need more time to think it over, I'll say, I understand. May I ask you a question? Have you ever taken a long time to think something over and it still turned out to be a very bad decision? Now that immediately creates some shock
Sure.
because,
Yeah. They got to think about that one, I think, right? Yeah.
and it creates a state of temporary shock. It breaks rapport, which we're taught never to do. I'm
Right.
saying, yes, there are times you have to break rapport. So that's one of the first sacred idols I'm iconoclastically, is that a word? Kicking over. So we're breaking rapport. We're using some shock. Once they begin to think about it that way, they can never go back to the old objection. And then I'll say, maybe it's not about time, but about the clarity you need to recognize
Yeah.
you can move forward today.
Makes sense.
Now, what we're doing is we're redefining the meaning. We're taking it from being about time to being about clarity. And the presupposition of that is if it's only about clarity, it must be a good idea to move forward. They just have to get clear on how and why. So,
Yeah, so, my experience, sometimes they have a hang up on something, right? Whatever the widget you're selling, whatever services you're selling, could be that they're hung up on one aspect of it. And I always call it flushing it out, right? Flushing out the negatives to find out what their
right,
reservations
or
are.
smoking it out or whatever.
Right. Yeah. We're using your terminology a little different than mine, I guess, but you're the pro, you're the author. So you got to be a pro, right?
No, but
But no, keep going. This is interesting stuff. Again, we're not having a show. Being in sales all these years, I am always open to listen to new strategies and techniques.
so
Right?
pattern interrupts are big ones. The other thing is I want to get rapport and even go beyond rapport. See, rapport is only as useful as it creates responsiveness. Aim for the right R. The right R is not rapport, it's responsiveness. If I can get responsiveness by breaking rapport, I'll do it. And even more than rapport, what's important is leadership. And I'll show you how to establish leadership very quickly. I did it earlier in the show with what I call implied relationship words. I said, before we begin our exploration of this opportunity together, so the words I used are we, explore, our, together. We implies a relationship. Our implies a relationship. Together implies a relationship. Before we explore, now let's look at that word explore. This is an incredibly powerful word because explore implies something. For every exploration, there must be a leader. And therefore, for every leader, there must be a what?
Follower.
Exactly. So we're implying without stating that they are going to be our followers. And someone who's our follower is much more powerful than someone we're just in rapport with. So before we begin our exploration together of our opportunity, not this opportunity, I just want to invite you. What does invite imply? Invite implies I'm extending a gift.
Right.
I didn't say I want you to. Then it's about me. I just want to invite you to please share the questions. I didn't say ask the questions. Remember, subtle words itself.
Right.
I said share the questions. What's the difference between share and ask? Ask is what we do to someone. Share is something we do with someone.
Right.
To please share the questions that naturally arise when a great decision is being made. Now, there's one little bit more cleverness in there. I'm saying share the questions that naturally arise when a great decision is being made. That means that every time they share a question, it reinforces the suggestion that they're making a great decision. So it's a post-hypnotic suggestion linking a behavior to an internal train of thought. It's pretty clever stuff.
No, it really is. It takes some training. I can see that this is not something that's intuitive to a lot of people.
No,
right?
It's not off the shelf.
Right.
You want something you can grab off the shelf? There's plenty of stuff.
There's a million. I tell you, I don't want to dog on sales books, but there's a gajillion of them out there. Right.
And they're mostly repeating each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't give you a nickel for most of them, to be honest with you, but
No,
that's just me.
no, I wouldn't either.
But I did buy your book, so I gave you. I don't forget what it even cost on Amazon Prime or whatever.
I get barely anything from Amazon. That's not the point.
Yeah, no, I get you. It's getting books out there. So, what do you think of obviously you've got your philosophy, your strategy. What are the biggest mistakes you see that salespeople make?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, they're focused more on behavior than they are on states of mind. They're focused
Okay.
on what they want the prospect to do rather than what state of mind they want the prospect in. So they're focused on getting the listing signed, or they're focused on getting the contract signed or the credit card coming out before they think to themselves, what state of consciousness, what state of mind, or what states of mind do I need my prospect in, such that signing the contract is something they can't wait to do. And that's done from creating and sustaining a certain state of mind, trusting themselves, being able to feel comfortable bringing up the real objections, trusting, and not only beyond trusting you, seeing you as their leader and seeing themselves as your follower, being able to get their questions honestly placed on the table. Don't assume your prospect is going to honestly tell you what their questions really are, because number one, they may not know and they don't want to
Yeah.
feel stupid.
No, I would absolutely agree with that one.
Yeah.
That's for
Yeah.
sure.
This is the problem with the philosophy that says make sure you ask the right questions. That's great. But how are you going to get them in the state where they even can focus in and discover what those questions are? And then how are you going to get them in a state where they're willing to tell you the answers without feeling manipulated? So those are some of the things that I think are really, really important to point out. And I would say another big mistake is that salespeople are invested in the sale, but they're just interested in their skills. They have it backwards. For me, a champion in any field, I know a young woman who went to the Olympics playing rugby, and she said, I'm always working on my skills. Sure, I put everything I can into the game, but afterwards I review it in my head and think, what could I have done better? So champions, and particularly champion salespeople, you have to be invested in your skills and just interested in the sale. Now, don't get me wrong. You have to be fully prepared and go in ready to win. I'm not saying you don't, but you really have to be invested in your skills. And to use a somewhat ridiculous metaphor, in a breakfast of bacon and eggs, the pig is invested, the chicken is interested.
Yeah, no, that's a great metaphor, Paul. By the
Mm-hmm.
way, I like that one. I'm gonna have to use that one someday. And I won't footnote you. By the way, I'm going to use it.
Thank you.
So, well, so you know, how do you how do you get most of your clients? Is it LinkedIn? Is it because I'm again being in sales? You've got one product and it's you, right? How are you getting your word out there?
I do podcast guest appearances. I do podcasting. I do a lot of joint ventures. We should possibly talk about that off the air for a few minutes. A lot of joint venturing. I've just signed on with a company to do LinkedIn prospecting, and that's primarily how I do it.
Cool. And so, in this role you're in now, how long have you been doing this as a sales trainer?
About five. No, well, that's not true. Um, I took some stabs at it in 2006, but I am a perfectionist. I didn't think it was good enough for me. So I've been doing this kind of thing for about 5 years, training. Now I've been doing sales online since
Sure.
1994.
Yep.
Courses I sell from the stage. I've sold. I did one seminar where I sold $50,000 worth of coaching from the stage. It's pretty high ticket stuff. So by the way, if you're a high ticket closer, I think you need to talk to me about training, not just you, but training your team.
Yeah, definitely something to talk about. No question. I'm always looking for the edge, right?
Yeah. And I guarantee for high ticket closers, if I can't raise your sales by 25, 30% in 90 days, I'll give you your money back. I'm that good. No one gives guarantees, but I give guarantees like that.
And you're humble too. I like that, Paul.
Are you being facetious?
I'm being facetious, obviously. You're a very confident guy.
Well,
I like
you know what? One of my childhood heroes, Muhammad Ali, said, if you can do what you say you can do, you ain't bragging.
That's right. Yeah. I loved him, by the way. Think we're getting off track here, but think about all the trash talking that goes on today. He was so far ahead of his time in the 60s and 70s, but he was fun about it though.
He said, I don't tell jokes. The funniest thing, the best joke is the truth. But also he is very polarizing. I'm
Yeah.
very polarizing. People either hate me or they like me. There are very few people who are neutral towards me. A lot of salespeople don't like my approach. Because I am teaching selling to the subconscious, they consider it manipulative. And
Yep.
okay,
I kind of can see how they would think that, you know.
I don't try to appeal to everybody. If you try to appeal to everybody, you won't be true to yourself. You'll lose your enthusiasm and you'll wind up appealing to virtually nobody.
Yeah. No, you have your convictions. I like that. I mean, there's nothing absolutely wrong with that.
Yeah.
So I was saying that you have your convictions, right? I mean, I think that's a good thing, and you have your belief systems, and you shouldn't deviate from that. That's what you feel, and that's what you feel that works. Then, and you have passion about it, then you'll be successful. I don't see why you should change, right? But you're right. I can see how not everyone would buy into this.
Oh, well,
It is what it is, you know. So
one of my favorite philosophers, Popeye. I am what I am, and that's all that I am.
yeah, there you go. I used to love those cartoons on Saturday mornings.
Yeah, Popeye the Sailor Man.
Yeah. So, well, like I said, there's a lot of different aspects of this, but I think you covered the basic principles of what you do, right? And that
Right.
was the goal for me today, was to get your message out there. I think it's interesting. It's a little bit different twist than what we're used to. You know, I can't tell you how many sales training classes I've had where the customer says this and you say that, and it's just so scripted. It never, and no one uses it, you know?
Well, scripts can be effective if they don't, or if they aren't perceived as scripts.
Right.
See, and scripts can be effective if they are loaded with suggestions to stimulate and communicate with the subconscious mind.
And I think you termed it embedded commands and suggestions, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, any if someone would want to get in touch with you, Paul, how would they do it?
There's two ways that I call invisible influence. They're little PDFs, 5-minute reads. Each one contains a little tip or technique that you can go out and use immediately, right away. So you can see results right away. Absolutely free. Text the word compel to 411-321.
Yep.
That's compel 411-321. If you're outside of the United States, text the word compel. I believe it's to 741, and it's 909-741-1321. Use WhatsApp to do it. So
okay,
if you're outside the United States, 1-909 741-1321. I didn't have my coffee today. The other way to do it is if you are a top earner and a high ticket closer, or you're already very successful in your sales job. If you want to apply to work with me, I really do only take 3 to 5 clients a year. And I am not cheap, but I do promise to speaker Paul Ross /apply. Speaker Paul Ross /apply. If I don't think I can work with you, I'll tell you, I don't want to take money from people I can't help. And really, it's a discussion, a conversation to see how or if I can help you.
Got it. Makes sense that you don't want to waste your time.
I don't want to waste their time.
Their time, yeah.
And also, if you think about it, because I guarantee results, I don't want to give refunds to people who aren't smart and aren't willing to do the work.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Paulie, I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the show. It's like I said, it's a different twist to what we're all used to hearing about sales. So I really appreciate it. So that's a wrap of Business Brains and the Bottom Line. Until next time, this is Paul Gallegro signing off.